Let's just bow our heads once again, if you don't mind, and pray together. Lord Jesus, we seek your presence now. We ask you to speak today. Help us to understand what you want to tell us, dear Lord, and may you be glorified through this topic. In Jesus' precious name we ask you this. Amen. I just want to let you know that this topic is a big topic. And looking at Watch Now, I don't want to bombard you with so much at once. And this will be actually a series of presentations. I was actually inspired by one book which I read some time ago, and I'm reading it again, which is called Generation Z. And I'll explain myself during this presentation. I wanted and planned actually and prepared here with you to share some Bible texts at the second half of my sermon, my presentation today. And we will see how we go, because I want to hear you and your thoughts on this very important topic, talking about relevance, our relevance today in the 21st century. And that might take some time. So if we don't finish the whole lot today, what I planned, we will do it in 2 weeks' time. Pastor David will be sharing with us from this place in 7 days, and I will be at Kapalaba Church. As you know, we also serve at Kapalaba Church once a month. But then I'll be in 2 weeks' time when I'll cover the Relevant Church Part 2, but there will be actually a few parts. This will be a series of more than 3-4 presentations. And you will see, I hope that we will all see and be able to recognize the time we live in and why is it so important. Today we're going to share some information which are quite related to the States. There are some things which we can draw here as well for us. There will be there will be some statistics as well. And some of those information might not be that relevant for us, but we can actually find them, what I want to say, what I want to share with this. And hopefully, find actually a biblical solution and model what happens here. If we don't go, because of time, into the Bible today that much, it will be in 2 weeks' time, because you will see this as the whole lot. Problem of relevance today, or situation of relevance today, is not an easy topic. And it is quite subjective. It could be subjective. But let's just go into the topic and let's see where we go. I've got some questions for you. And you know that last week when we talked about the last 7 plagues, and thank you for your feedback and for your blessings with that sermon, you have noticed that I like to ask some questions at the start of sermon presentation. And I want to see now and to share with you some questions. So first question is, what do you think of future of Christianity? It's an honest question, and I really want your answer just briefly, nicely. It's not a rhetorical question. I really want us to speak up. This is live streamed as well, as we mentioned already, so people in the hall are watching us. If you want to give your contribution from the hall, feel free to just run here, and we will let you just ask us that question. But what do you think of future of Christianity? What is your thought about Christianity today? What is our future? I'll say, sorry?
God's Spirit is not going to desert.
Sorry, Ken, what was that? God's Spirit?
It's not going to desert.
Excellent. So Ken is saying God's Spirit is not going to desert. So in other words, what Ken is saying, this church belongs to God. Is that right?
It's going to continue to be here and relevant.
Exactly. It's going to be to continue and be relevant. Thank you so much for that. Any more thoughts? Yes, Leon and then Michael.
I think it'll get stronger.
It will get stronger. Okay. So basically, yeah, it will get stronger. Rather than we say what Leon is saying. Michael, what do you reckon?
If we say that it's going to get stronger, we also have to determine, are we talking Christianity as a whole, or are we talking Seventh-day Adventists?
In general.
In general, statistics show that Christianity is getting less and less popular around the world.
There we go.
And that a lot more people are becoming, even though they might call themselves Christians, but they don't associate themselves too much with Christians. So yes, I agree with Brother Ken. A certain group of people, a certain group of
Yeah.
Christians is going to get stronger because they recognize the times that they live
Yes.
in and they grasp the Word of God. But Christianity as a whole is not going to be popular, and the world is becoming more and more secular.
Secular. That is one of the key words I want to share with you. Question number 2. How do you feel about the future of SDA Church? Right. So we feel right? Bright. Bright. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So the right. We feel right. Okay. Bright. Thank you so much. Miljan? Okay. It will appear that it will fall, but there will be something bright. Okay. Thank you. Leo? It will be shaken. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next question. Is the SDA Church relevant today? So Ken says, absolutely. What are your thoughts? Leon says, yes. What do you think? I want to hear some of the YAs. Let's hear some of the millennials and Generation Z. What do you guys think? Is the Seventh-day Adventist Church relevant today? No right or wrong answer. We are here to share. We won't be judged for this. Don't worry. Just the whole world sees this. What do you say? Okay, it provides the answers for questions. Thanks, Ken. I see Lawrence, Pastor Lawrence. What was that? Sorry? Okay, as long as the Christ is focused on our faith, we're good. Okay.
My first answer was to do with question 1.
Okay.
God's Spirit won't withdraw. It doesn't mean we might have to change the presentation
All right.
reaching people.
So there will be some changes. There will be some, it will fluctuate. Is that right?
So our message is the same.
As long as our message is same. Cheryl, pardon me.
We will still have to preach the three angels' message.
Yes.
That is a message that our church is
Yep.
sending to preach.
Yep.
We need to get cracking on it.
Yeah. So we need to preach the three angels message. Thank you, Cheryl, for that. Once again, we hear the responses from mid and more experienced generation. Do we have other responses? Okay. How the SDA Church could be more relevant? This is a rhetorical question now, because I want to. This will be actually. This is our topic for next few weeks. I almost said several weeks, but I think it is important for us to be up to date. I think it is important for us to be relevant. Does that change the message? Well, let's see what happens. I strongly agree at the very beginning that the message, the content of the message has to stay the same. The essence, the Bible does not change. God does not change. But in saying that, you will see, and we will all recognize and see actually an interesting detail, which I plan to share with you, particularly from Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5. Most likely won't have time for that today, but in 2 weeks' time, I promise to you. Let's just go into one interesting quote. Again, book what I mentioned is Me Generation Z, written by Dr. James White. Interesting name and last name, isn't it? He said the heart of secularism is a functional atheism. Rather than rejecting the idea of God, our culture simply ignores him. I'll share with you shortly some stats which show actually how today's world is going and where the trend is in terms of Christianity and those questions. I'm talking in the context of the global Christianity. I'm not focusing just on the SDA Church. I truly believe that we are Christians. We have one God. And that's why I talk in this context as Christianity as such. But one detail which I'm really inspired from this quote is, it appears, and in my conversation with people elsewhere around me, I really see that people not necessarily do not believe in God as much as our culture ignores God. That's a key word I want to share with you soon. So, in other words, there is something which is called, or some people who are called nuns. What his gentleman proposes, before you read this, I'd like your attention, is he proposes in this book that it appears, that it looks, that during the last 20 plus years, there is a rise of nuns, or nuns, people who do not belong anywhere. When I say anywhere, people who do not necessarily reject the idea about God, but people who can't associate with any religion, if that makes sense. They have a context, and please, millennials and Generation Z, I'd like you to help me in this during my presentation, or maybe after as well. But what statistics are suggesting is that there is a rise of nuns, people who can't associate themselves with one church or the other, or religious organization. So there is this question, who are the nuns? The short answer is that they are the religious unaffiliated. When asked about their religion on various surveys and polls, they don't answer Baptist or Catholic or any other defined faith. They simply say, I'm nothing. And their number are rising faster than any other group. In other words, if we want to stay relevant, and it is important for us to be relevant in this world today, we need to define and identify who the nuns are, and to see actually that their groups is growing and growing and growing. You see, my friends, according to statistics, the nuns, people who actually do not associate with any kind of religion, are not anymore, are no longer the second largest religious group in the United States. They are the largest group. And it is important for us to understand that, because if we necessarily just reject this idea, oh, these guys, they don't believe in God, they're not with us, they don't go to any other church, they're just atheists, that's wrong. According to those statistics, that is absolutely wrong. Because they do have idea about spirituality, they do have idea about religion, but they define it different. So who are those nuns? Can we identify them? Can we stay up to date with them? Look at this graph. This actually graph, Americans, it is from the States as I mentioned to you, are people who are attending church for at least once a year. And listen and look at these statistics, please. From 1994, we had about close to 62% in an average, people who were attending church on a regular basis, according to this stat, corner of church and state. And in 2014, my friends, look at this, what happens. Just in, 14 plus 6? Mads, what is 14 plus 6? 20. Okay. In 20 years, just in 2 decades, we see a significant drop in attendance of attendees to worship. And we shouldn't be surprised with that, because particularly in the context of COVID and COVID world we live in, we can see similar tendency, for a right reason, for a good reason, not right reason, but for a good reason. We can see people declining in attendance, and we cry for those times, but it appears that it looks like this is not just the case of the SDA church, but the Christianity in general. The other graph I want to share with you is just when I found that, I was just, whoa, look at this. This is quite interesting. Percentage of nuns in the United Kingdom, because the statistics which you just saw before, this graph was done in the States, but similar statistics were done, researches were done in the UK, and results were almost identical. So that trend is not just for one continent, but it looks like, at least in the world, in the Western world, so to say. In the Western world. Look at this, my friends. In 1963, according to the stats, there was about 3% of those who defined themselves as nuns. I don't belong anywhere. But look at this jump in 2015. It's 50 years later. 44%, 44.7%. So what a huge jump of those nuns, of people who do not associate themselves with any particular religion. So how are we going to reach them out? What are we going to do with that? Who are these guys? But also another important stat which I find here is that 66%, so 2/3 of those who are nuns are 25 and under. So that's our children. So what happens, and what a question we need to ask here today is, are we relevant today? If 2/3 of those who are the nuns are 25 and under, that's an alarming thing. That's very interesting. So in other words, there is a question which is asked here. What is the future of Christianity? Is the Christian sky falling? What is going to happen in 30 years, 50 years? So, is the Christian sky falling? Many cultural observers have countered the dismal statistic with the following truths, and they are true. So once again, this is, I'm just sharing with you quickly some results of Christian researchers. Christianity is on the rise worldwide, particularly in the global south. So that is the truth. So we have the global south, we're talking about Central and South America, we're talking about Africa, we're talking, so as we call it global south, there is Christianity is basically in the rise. Christianity also remains the world's largest faith. So there's some good news with you, which I'm sharing with you. Christianity is still the largest faith. And the most distant projections to 2050 see it maintaining that lead. This also includes the United States, with 71% currently affirming a Christian faith. So in other words, what it says that by 2050, it looks like if this trend continues, Christianity will be number one religion in the world. But what happens later, we don't know. Let's see. So, my friends, it would certainly be correct to say that rumors of Christianity's death are premature. Yet, any informed observer also knows the following. The rise of the nuns, particularly 25 and under, throughout the West is real and cannot be ignored. There is something which we introduce now, and that word I actually borrowed, I took from this gentleman, Dr. James, is something which is called the squishy center. The squishy center. The squishy center is being pushed away from Christianity, and as a result is rapidly changing the American culture of landscape, or I would say just the Western world culture, big time. So in other words, there is a question which we ask, what is driving all of this? Why do we see those changes? How come we have those changes? Why are we going this way in terms of, in particularly, with in the countries of the Western world? Well, according to the author, he introduces 3 words, and I want to share this with you because it makes perfect sense why these things are happening. First one is something which we call secularization. Secularization means there is less of a supportive context of faith. In other words, we explain things, we have reasons to believe. Faith is not, and church and religion does not become an explanation for things. Secular means being divided, separated from church. That means secular. So secularization is one reason. Number 2 is privatization, which actually has made all things related to faith a private affair, like having a favorite color or food. But most devastating of all has been pluralization. What does this mean? Not only there are multiple faiths and worldviews, which basically compete for our attention, But there is an idea in pluralist view that all of them are equally important, and they are all, it doesn't matter whether you're Christian, whether you're Buddhist or Muslim or Jew, pluralists will just offer you, this is what it is, and you're fine. Those three terms are quite, I would say, and I would agree with the author as well, how to say this, it's their contribution for our culture which is changing. Once again, secularization, privatization, and pluralization. If you want me to chat with you later on this one, or feel free to ask me and we can talk, particularly in the context of this presentation. Why is this so important? Here is why. We introduced before something which we call squishy center. We also have, as we said, secularists and believers. In other words, in any society, in one country, you will always have, these are conservative, by the way, figures, but basically we would have about 25% of people who are Orthodox secularists. They are not interested into religion at all. They don't believe in God. They are, they don't care about anything which is spiritual and religious. That's secularization, secularists. But also, on the other side, you have believers. Probably, again, conservatively speaking, 25 or 1/4 of those, according to statistics which are done, 25 of those, no matter what happens in this world, they will always stay believers. They will always have faith. That's who they are. And authors agree that there is basically about 50% of people who are called squishy center, which are basically driven based on something which we call culture today. So you remember my previous slide about 3 items, as we said, secularism, pluralization, privatization, which actually dictates a culture of a society. And based on that culture, squishy center would go either left or go right. For instance, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, let's say that. What was the culture 100 years ago in terms of religion? Well, it was in to be religious. It is in to go to church. That's where you see people. That's what happens. And basically, that was the culture back then. But basically, today culture is different. This is the squishy center which basically is prone to influence. It is squishy because those in its midst tend to be soft and pliable in terms of being shaped. They could be shaped. They could be done this or the other way. And when I was doing my studies, I was actually thought the same graph in a different context. No matter what you do in a society, in any context, in any community, my friends, in a classroom, maybe a church, I don't know, you'll always have 25% of people who will always be your supporters, regardless what happens. You'll always have 25% of people who will be against you, regardless what happens. And you'll have 50% of those who are, they don't mind one way or the other. What do you think? That politicians know this as well. Those things. So the words which are basically being fought for is those 50%, because they could go one way or the other. I mean, you know that for yourself. One year you might vote for one party, the other year you might vote for someone else. But it is interesting to notice that it is this squishy because this in the midst tend to be soft and pliable in terms of being shaped. They could be shaped. Their individual beliefs have little definition and even less conviction. If they consider themselves Christians, it is with a small c. Those in the center do not have the solidity of the secularists or the whatever is culturally most influencing. However, the culture tends to mold, shape, and pressure. That is how they are molded, shaped, and pressured. Because culture shapes them. In other words, what is in today, and today is not in to be a Christian, of course they will go that way. Today is not in to mention church, because who else talks about church? Who else wants to go to church? Well, gyms became today's modern churches, because that's our culture. And that's why we're talking on this topic today. And we need more time than just one presentation. So what do we do with that? What do we do with this squishy center? Culture today has changed. It's not moving people that way anymore. It's not shaping people towards church anymore. It's not shaping people towards God anymore. Because we have secularism, we have privatization, and we have pluralism as well. You remember those three? Now, virtually everything in culture is moving the squishy center to the secularist side. That's our culture. We're pushing. The culture is pushing this center towards this way. Everything goes that way, towards secularism. And we can see that. We can see that in churches. We can see in societies, everything. So we are not immune. When I say in churches, I mean in churches in general, Christianity talking as such. You see, my friends, today, if asked about their religion, people in the center would just say they're nothing, because that's the cultural thing to say. I remember was a kid basically who was born in a communist country and was not, that old, but I do remember that it was not into believing God. It was some kind of, I would say, progressive socialism or communism, whatever. I don't want to go into those details, but it was not in to say you believe in God. I'm talking about 80s and people who grew up, baby boomers, 60s, 70s, and of course 80s. Of course, you being a Christian, absolutely not, that's not in. But then in 90s, when there was a collapse of former Yugoslavia, you see the churches they were just filled in with people. It was kind of revival. It was just amazing because there was a social context there as well, because people wanted to come to churches. All of a sudden it became popular to bear a cross and call God's name. But now those things are changing again. You see, my friends, people today don't go to church because that's also the cultural thing not to do. I can stay at home. I can watch it in front of my screens as well. This is what I mean by the squishy center and why the culture dictates it. Are we immune to this culture? What do we do with that culture? If you want to stay, what did we say, if you want to stay relevant, you've got to flow with the culture, with all these trends where they are going, and what on earth is going to happen with us then? So do we fight against that culture, or what do we do with that? That is the object of our presentations for next 4 or 5 Sabbaths. We'll see how we go. So as we said, culture is moving, the squishy center to the secularist side, and people today don't go to church because that's also this cultural thing not to do. Interesting part. As I said to you before, it is important for us to understand who are those who drive this culture. Because we've noticed that nuns, or people who do not necessarily affiliate themselves with any religion, but are still religious, it could be an oxymoron, but trust me, you will see next time what I mean by that, is important for us to say who these people are. 2/3 of those, as we said, are 25 and under. Well, who is this Generation Z? That's exactly them. Generation Z are people who are 25 and under. We have baby boomers. This is approximate a year's suggestion, so we can't really say this is literally, that's the thing, but more or less. We have baby boomers, 1946, 63, people who were born in that time. These guys are great. After World War II, they are great. They are like bees. They are working. They can you do? Yeah, sure. Let's do this. Great attitude. Brilliant. Good stuff. Then we have Generation X. From 1964 to 79, millennials 1980 to 94, and then we have Generation Z, which were born from 1995 and 2010. how can we observe these people? Who are those people who are you know, driven in that way? So basically, based on the mindset list from 2019, I'll go quickly through this list. Some of those items, as I mentioned to you, won't be that much relevant to us, but according to, once again, mindset list 2019 list, pardon me, Generation Z are those among those who were not alive in their lifetime are Princess Diana, Notorious B.I.G., Jacques Cousteau, and Mother Teresa. So in other words, these guys were not born that. They were born after death of those people. Since Generation Z have been on the planet, there were hybrid automobiles have always been mass-produced. Google has always existed in its founding words to organize the world information and make it universally accessible. They have never licked a postage stamp. That's a part of past. Email has become the new formal communication, while text and tweets remain enclaves for the casual. So those are characteristic observations of Generation Z. Full-mouthed kids have always been playing in South Park. Also, they have grown up treating Wi-Fi as an entitlement. The announcement of someone being the first woman to hold a position has impressed only their parents, because that's quite normal now. Cell phones have become so ubiquitous in class that teachers do not know which students are using them to take notes and which ones are playing a party. Actually, I'm quite happy that here in Brisbane, at least schools I know, that mobile phones are prohibited to use, if I know correctly. If you say around the turn of the century, they may well ask you which one, which century. Generation Z also read so many books of Harry Potter, Ron and Hermione, as they built their reading skills through all 7 volumes. Attempts at human cloning have never been federally funded, but do require FDA approval. The therapeutic use of marijuana has always been legal in a growing number of American states. We can see something else happens here. Those are characteristics of observation of Generation Z. Teachers have always had to insist that them papers employ sources in addition to those found online. The Lion King has always been on Broadway. And I see that some of you are smiling. That's exactly right. At least mom and dad had their new Nintendo 64 to help them get through long nights sitting up with a baby. First responders have always been heroes. That's our Generation Z. Splendor has always been a sweet option in the United States. The Atlanta Braves have always played at 10 field. Again, not that much relevant to us, but proud parents recorded their first steps on camcorders mounted on their shoulders like bazookas. They had no idea how fortunate they were to enjoy the final 4 years of federal budget surplus. So that's our Generation Z. It is important to understand how they function, what are their thoughts, because that's our future. So what do we learn from that? What do we conclude from them? Do you know that the Bible actually talks about this? The Bible talks about generation to next generation and generation, and particularly in the context of 2 versions of the 10 Commandments, and one we find in Exodus 20 and the other one in Deuteronomy 5. Would you like to know what actually what does the Bible speak about those generations? I'm not talking Generation Z, but I'm talking about 2 generations who left Egypt. Do you know there are reports of 10 commandments? One is in Exodus 20 and the other one is Deuteronomy 5. Would you like to know how the Bible explains this and what counsel the Bible has for us in regards with that? Would you? Come in 2 weeks' time, please. You need to be here in 2 weeks' time. You don't want to miss it. And I'm not selling this to you now. Or maybe I am, you know. But basically, I want to see you in 2 weeks' time and next week in 7 days as well, because we will discover interesting points. I believe, and I found this information as well, when I was exposed to this information in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, that just blew my mind away. But as I said to you, we will not stop there, because we want to explore these generations that a bit more and to have some practical suggestions, so to say, in the weeks which are before us when I'm sharing from this place. May God bless you all. and see you next week.